Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on the Masechtas Ketubot Daf Chaf, we are going to begin on the bottom of Yud Testament Bays, about 7 lines from the bottom. Tan Rabbana. So the Gemara says as follows: Shtayim chasum min al shtar. You have two people that signed on a document, and umesu, and then tragically afterwards they died. So they're not here to be able to verify that in fact it's their signatures. However, uvo shnaim and ashuk, two other people from the marketplace came. The amru yadanu sheksav yadam, who I actually recognize these signatures. I know whose they are, and therefore we are here to verify whose signatures these are. However, aval anusim hayu katanim hayu psul edus hayu. So in this situation, they're believed, and the reason why they're believed is based on what we've been saying up until now. It's a peshas or peshniter. Until there was kiyum shtaros, so the shtar we couldn't really do much with. However, now all of a sudden these witnesses come, and these witnesses are saying that in fact this is their signature. However, they're invalid witnesses. So therefore, because of that, we believe them. However, let's say we have witnesses already that these are their signatures before these people came, or let's say that there was another situation where their ksav was signed on another document, and there was some type of a complaint, there was some question whether or not there was a complete validity of this particular document, and therefore the Beis Din came and investigated and looked into the whole matter, and they themselves verified that this is a valid shtar, and therefore the Eidim are also valid witnesses. So therefore, ein elu nemanim. Now that these people later on and come and say this claim that anusim hayinu psul edus hayinu, we're not going to believe them because they no longer have this peshaser, because the shtar was already verified without them. So on this, the Gemara says as follows: the Gemara umagminon be kibishtar amalia. So now you're saying, if let's say there are two witnesses that came before and said, yes, this is their signature, and now you have these two other people that are saying, okay, this is their signature, but they're postulators. So for the Gemara, how could you say that this shtar is perfectly fine to collect from? How can you say magvinin be kibishtar amalia? V'mai trein who l'char, it's 2 against 2, and therefore once it's trey, you shouldn't be able to say that this is a valid shtar to be able to collect from. So this Gemara says as follows: Omer of Sheshes Zois Omeres. From this we can derive, actually let's look at Rashi, treinin who Edi hashtar beis ve'elu beis me'idim aleim shepsulim hoyu bois shah. So Zois Omeres, says the Gemara, that hakchashat chils hazamahi, that when it comes to a second group of people, those individuals in which there is contradictory statements, that is actually like the beginning of Hazama. We know that when it comes to Edi Hazama, the second group of witnesses are the ones that are believed over the first ones, to say Imonu Ha'isim b'makom ploni, to be able to then punish the first group of witnesses. So we know that there's a huge difference between Hachash and Hazmana. When it comes to Edi Hazama, so the second witnesses are believed over the first. Edi HaChasha is a situation where they're just contradictory statements. They're not saying that you were with me, but they're disagreeing with the statement or facts of the first group of witnesses. So according to this, HaChasha must be Tchilas HaZamahi. How do we see this? As we continue to Chaf Amud Aleph, that Ukashem Shin Mazimin Asa Eidim El Bifnehem, the only time you could be mazim the witnesses is only if you're in front of them. Kach ein machishim Asa Eidim El Bifnehem, says Rashi. Sharihem boyin l'chayovim, they're coming to cause problems. Kedei l'oinshen or nefesh or mamoin, when it comes to maybe a capital offense or requiring to pay. Vatar Amr v'huad bevalav yavu bal hashor v'yamod al hashor. So we derive that the owner of the ox is the one that needs to be present at this time when there's this accusation. And this is actually question 1, which is only in Rashi. Menolan shein mazimin asa'edim el bifneim kivan sheboin l'chayvin. Since these witnesses are coming to cause problems, of Oynish Nefesh Amamin Vatar Amr Behuid Baval of Yavel Bal Hashor Biyamoid Al Shoiro. When a person is trying to cause some type of loss for a person, whether it's them being sentenced to death or some monetary thing, just like the owner of the shore is supposed to be present, so too when it comes to this, it's necessary that they must be present. And therefore, so that's when it comes to Dini Hazamu. So Kach Ein Machishin, Yafil Levatel Edusin. Even if their entire intention is to be Mavatel the Edus, so we say that that will not work unless they are actually in front of the person in question. So the first group already said it's fine. The second group is now coming and saying, no, this is not good signature. So in that situation, the second group cannot come to mimavatal the original edus because it was not bifnehem. So Amili Rav Nachman ilu havi kamon. Let's understand this a little bit better. If these people were in front of us, umachishin luhu, and they would be contradicting one another, havi hachasha, it would consider as edus hachasha, v'loi havi mashgichin behu, and we would not pay attention to the star, v'dahavi le'edus mucheshas, because it's considered to be edus mucheshas. That's what Rashi says. Be'edi hashtar ligvos alpihim. We're not going to look at this document and actually rely on it to be able to collect from it. So hashta deleisnahu. Now that they're not here, dil have come on. If they would have been here, dilma havi maidilhu. Then maybe they would have admitted that they in fact were apostle. So these witnesses are not here. But if they would be here, maybe they actually would admit that that in fact you're right. I was coerced of sorts to be able to sign this document. So l'chayra. Mehimni, why believe? So El Rav Nachman Uki Trey Lahadi Trey. What we do is we put 2 against 2, and therefore we keep the money b'cheskes mari, the person who has the money now, namely the lova. The borrower is the one that has this money, and therefore we're not going to have this star which says that, let's say, that he's supposed to pay a certain amount of money, the malva will not be able to collect from it because it's 2 against 2. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say it's 2 against 2, and therefore the money will stay where it is. Midi havia nechsi de bar shatya. Similar to the dinim of nechsi bar shatya, Rashi, that we eat toughest midi. Let's say he actually grabbed onto it. V'hadar asi hai v'tavimine lo mafkin mine. Diamrina and uki trail hadi train b'mod b'cheskas heicha dekoi. So the truth is, if let's say the malva grabbed hold of this money, so then also we're not going to take the money away from the malva. But now that it's in the hands of the lova, we're not going to take it out of his hands either. Just like the story of the possessions of Bar Shatya. The Bar Shatya Zavin Nichse. This person sold his possessions. He sold his karka. Asu Beitre. So 2 people came and Amri Kashu Shaita Zavin. That this transaction took place when he was a shaita, and therefore because of that it wasn't a valid transaction. Yosbe Trevi Amakashu Cholim Zavit. No, he actually sold it when he was, Rashi says Cholim is Bari. He was healthy, and therefore it was a valid transaction. So who do we believe? So Ravashi Uki Tre Lahadi Tre. We have 2 against 2. Vuki Mamoyne Mecheskas Bar Shatya, and we keep the money by Bar Shatya because again the transaction took place. And therefore, if there's a question, so we say that the money stays in his hands. Which is similar to what we're saying here. That because it's 2 against 2, so the lova gets to keep his money. If the malva was typhus, then he keeps it. Only if that he has a chazaka connected to his father. Says Rashi, it's already known that this land was his father's. Shoyu shel vayisa, the chazaka malihi. Avalesli chazaka di ahavosei. If let's say he doesn't have any proof that there's no chazaka that it was once his father's, amrina kishu shaita zavin kishu shaita zavin, that he sold it and bought it in that process of a shait, and therefore we're not going to keep it by him. So when will we keep it by Nechsi Bar Shatya? If we already know that 100% it's his at some point because his father once owned it. However, in a situation where the person does not have father does not have a chazaka, so then we're going to say that lav davka does this person actually have ownership of this land, and therefore because of that it could actually be transferred over to the other individual. Okay, fighter. So with that said, the Gemara continues with the following thought. We do not do hazama on witnesses el b'fneim, as we said, unless it was done in front of them, which is what we established. However, when it comes to contradictory testimony, that could be done shelo b'fneim. That could be done not in front of them. Now, v'hazama shelo b'fneihem, when it comes to hazama, not in front of the parties, nehi da hazama l'havi. Okay, fine. So it's not going to constitute as edi hazama. However, hachashim yahavya. L'chayra, it should still consider as edi hachasha. Says Rashi, lo'oinsham loy nefesh l'mamoin hachasha havi lavat ledusa. Maybe it's true. It would not be enough in order to be able to punish the first group of witnesses. It's not considered to be a valid edi hazama, but it should at least be enough to be considered as edi hachasha to be mavatal the edus. Amar Mar, im yesh edim sheksav yadam huzeh. Let's say you have witnesses to already verify the authenticity of this document. There's another document that these signatures already were verified. Mishtar Shekarl of Arar, again, as we said, that there was a complaint against this document, and the Beis Din looked into the matter, and therefore they said this is in fact a valid document. So in them monim, regarding this new second document in question, these witnesses are not going to be believed because it's already been established that this is Kim Shtaros. Now, Karl of Arar in law, Karl of Arar, let's say there was a complaint in Lo Karl of Arar loy. It's only when there was actually a complaint, which means because there was a complaint, they looked thoroughly into the matter. If they did not have a complaint, maybe they didn't look thoroughly into this matter, and therefore it's not considered to be enough of validation of these signatures. So Masayli Rav Asi. In Rav Asi, ein mekayomenas a shtar, we do not verify a shtar, el mishtar shekar of Arav huksik bebeis din. It has to be, again, that the Beis Din had a document that was in question and they investigated into the matter. And therefore, once it's on that level, so therefore it's obviously there was questions, there was a party that disagreed with it, and then now that the Beis Din reached a verdict that this is in fact a valid document, that satisfies all parties. So Amri Nardoi, Ein Mekayamnas Ashtar El Mishtik Suvos, it says you cannot verify a document unless you have literally two ksuvos, o mishtei sadais, or two fields. That you have that they were sitting there for 3 years. Bishofi, Rashi says, below Irur, and there was no complaints, which probably means the fact that no one made a machal must be his. When it comes to a document that was already verified elsewhere, because through these signatures, avol miyad atzmo lo. However, little miyad atzmo from themselves, no. Maishna tachas yad atzmo loy dilma zufim mizayef, because maybe it was a forged signature. So mitachas yudei acher nami dilma ozol the chazos of mizayef. Maybe again you can look at those signatures that were verified, memorize what those signatures were. Now you can duplicate those signatures, and therefore that's also a form of forgery. So that much a person is not able to do. For a person to be able to look at another verified document in a Beis Din and to say, okay, now I'm going to sign off exactly the way that document is to this one, that much we're not going to be concerned that a person will end up doing. Tarabana. Now the Gemara says another situation. Kaisav Adam Edusai Alashtar, that a person is allowed to write his testimony on a document. A person may not remember everything so well, so sometimes it's better to write down what happened, and that's acceptable. And you could even testify based on that which you wrote down. Even after many years. You have to remember from yourself. In other words, you can write it down, and you write down something on a Google document of an entire incident, And then a few months later, you can look at it and of course, I remember this, I remember this, I remember that. But it's just a way to be able to make sure that all the details are done properly, are mentioned, and are written properly, and going to be said properly. But if, let's say, you have no recollection, when you look at that paper, like, really, this happened? I guess I wrote it down, I don't remember any of this, that's going to be problematic. And that's what the Gemara says here. That afil achar kama shanim, you actually have to remember it. Even if you don't remember, it's still going to be fine. It says Rashi, he says that after you saw the document, nasim beliboy, you put into your heart, v'nisker, and then you remember. It says Rashi, that it has to actually be your testimony from your mouth and not based on something that you read. So therefore, it has to be, according to all Shittas, something in which a person actually 100% has recollection of that which they wrote down. It can't be just reading something and then testifying on something that was once read. Omer Rabba, Shma Minam Rav Yochanan. So we can learn out actually from the Shita of Rav Yochanan that says Alpha Bi She'en Zercha Ma'atzmo. So you can derive from Rav Yochanan that Hani Beitrei, if you have two people, Diyadi Sahidusa, and they know testimony. However, Uminshe Chadinai, one of them forgot the testimony. Midkar Chad L'Chavre, the other one could remind the other. So Yiboilhu Atzmo Mai. What does that mean? Says Rashi, Im Baldin Atzmo Maskiro Ad Shenisker Mai. What's the din if the Baldin, not one of the witnesses, the Baldin himself, if the only way he's able to remember in this way, what's the din when it comes to that? So Rav Chavivi Omer Fil Atzmo, and Marba Rei de Ravashi Omer Atzmo Lo. The Hilchasa Atzmo Lo. The halacha is not when it comes to the Baldin himself. This kula is only when it comes to Eidim, when it comes to witnesses, but not the actual Baldin. As we continue to Chaf Amud Beis. So the Gemara says, V'isur Murabanan, but if we're dealing with a young Talmud Chacham, someone, Rashi says, is the witness, so then, if that's who it is, Afil Atzmai, even if he is also the Baldin, if the Sur Murabanan is the Baldin, we're going to still allow him. It says Rashi, because Ilav, the Chi Ramia Navshe Midkar Shaper Lo Yihavi Samach Asfekel Mekim Asude. If there was any doubt in his mind, because he's a Yerush Shamayim, because of that, he's not going to just say, oh yeah, fine, this was the testimony. He's only going to do it in a situation where he is 100% sure that he remembers. Kihod Rav Ashi, the Havi Yodia Le Besadusa, Rav Kahana, the new testimony, Sarmalay, Mi Dakar Mar Hai Sidusa, does anyone remember this testimony? Malay, lo, no one remembers. Avlav Hachi Hachi Havi, don't you remember this one? What it was? Or Malay Yadana, I don't know. Well, Saif Idkar Rav Ashi, eventually he remembered, and then Asidle, and he testified. So Chasir Rav Kahana, the Havi Mechasim. He saw that Rav Kahana, upon seeing everything that had transpired, he was Rashi's Megam game. He was a little bit perplexed. The fact that Rav Ashi testified, even though it was only after being reminded. You think I'm relying on you? No. The truth is, it was completely based on myself, and I remembered myself. The fact that he mentioned it, okay, fine, he mentioned it. But it wasn't because of him mentioning it, and I'm just repeating what he said. No, I actually know definitively the testimony myself. Tanan Hasam. Hatiluliyos, Rashi says, regarding these mounds, what is that referring to? So Rashi says, V'derech b'nei Adam, likfor betel. It used to be that when one would bury someone, it was done in a mound of earth. Why? So Rashi says, Mishum de'en b'nei Adam matin min haderech l'avar alav. Because a person doesn't go to the side too much to pass by. So it says like this: if, let's say, you have this mound, and therefore there's a possibility that there's a mace there, hakrovos, if they are close by to your city, close by, bein le'ir, bein le'derech, whether they're close to your city or to the road, echad chadashos v'echad yeshanos, if they're new or old mounds, temeos, because we are pretty confident, again, there's a mace there. However, harachoko, says Rashi, de'ein ish yechida halecha sham. If it's far that a woman herself would not go that distance, so then it depends. If these mounds are far away, if they're chadashos taharos, if they're new mounds, then we're not going to assume that there's a kever there, because if there was, then people would know about it, because these are new mounds. So if it's a new mound of earth, probably this people would have already known that would have been used for a kever, because it just was created. Yeshanos Tameos. However, if it's rachoko, even though it's rachokos, but if it's old, says Rashi, shkvar nishtaka chadavar min hayudim. The people that typically remember where all the grave sites are, they may not know the status of this mound because it's been there so long, and even though it was far away, it's still tummy. So, Fretimar, Ezu Kroivo, what exactly means it's close? So, Chamishim Amma, if it's 50 amos away to the city, the Ezu Hi Yishana, what's considered to be an old mound? Shishim Shana Dibra Meir. So, within 60 years, person of Chayro remembers, we can find someone in the city, maybe an older person, when they were younger, has the ability to testify regarding a mound that is that old. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kroiva, what does it mean close? It means Shein Kroiva Himenu. There's no other mound closer to it. And therefore, probably, you would choose the mound of earth which is most convenient for you. Yeshana Shein Adam Zaycha. It means that this person doesn't remember its status. So, my ear, my derech. What is the din when it says by the city, by the road? So ilay ear mamish, derech mamish, the sveika mi machsakinan tuma. Just because it's a doubt, we're going to automatically assume that these things are tummy. V'yom reish lakish, ilu matzu v'tir Eretz Yisrael. That we come up with an excuse in order to be able to make Eretz Yisrael tahar. We're not going to just start saying, oh yeah, this is probably tummy. So everything becomes tummy. And the problem is, Rashi says, that Rashi says Alma misfeka lo machsakinan tuma bekarkas shel Eretz Yisrael, because we're dealing with truma and tahara. So if there's a case of a person walking around with truma or hektish items, so if in fact everything is safek, then you're not going to be able to eat it, or maybe it can end up being burnt. So therefore, in general, when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, we're much more careful and much more lenient. So Rav Zera, what it means. Ir hasmucha basic varus. It means a city that's close to the cemetery. The derech is derech basic varus, the way to the cemetery. Now bishlam and derech basic varus, the zimnin dimisrami beina shmashas umikru kavru batel. So why would a person bury someone in this heap of this mound of earth? Why don't you just bring the mace to the cemetery like you're supposed to? So it's very possible that it was almost Bein Shmash's time. Rashi says Shel Erev Shabbos, so it's almost Shabbos. So they mistimed, or it was not a lot of time, and therefore they had no choice but to bury the mace in the tail, and they couldn't make it to the basic varus. So therefore it is shaykh that this pile or this mound actually has a mace in it. Ela'ir hasmuch basic varus, kul basic varus azli. Understand, if it's a city near the basic varus, then all of them to the basic varus are going to go. So what exactly is this case? Sham Rav Chanina mitarsha nashim karvisham nifleim, says we mentioned before about women. And this is the reason why we mentioned about women, that as we saw before, Rashi says that when it comes to women, ein b'nei adam matin min derech la'avar. So it says as follows, that when it comes to women, if they have a stillborn or of sorts, a miscarriage, they will bury their nifleim umukishchin, or child who has these blemishes, a person who has blemishes, zoriseihem, their limbs that were amputated, ad chamishim amma azla ihi l'chuda, until 50 amos, a woman will go by herself. Tvei dabra inshi bahada. More than that, she's going to go with someone else. Ubesek varis azl, and they'll go to the cemetery. Hilkach tumma beretz Yisrael machsakinan. You're right. When it comes to tumma beretz Yisrael, we're not going to just automatically assume. So the whole reason why I brought this down is because we can see from the Shita of Rameir, who mentions the time of an old mound of remembering is 60 years. Hai Sehudusa, it must be when it comes to testimony, Ad Shisin Shin Midker. A person remembers testimony for 60 years. Tvei Lo Midker. Because that's what we're defining an old mound, which at that point people no longer know of whether there's a mace there. So it must be that that's the din also when it comes to a kever, when it comes to this to all edus. Where it says lohi. Hasam hu delo rami leha v'hacha kivan rami leha feel to v'nami. Says Rashi. Avulhacha shiasu aid badavar. If you are an actual witness on a specific thing and only you know the information, if you give testimony, we're going to believe you. Because the fact that you know this testimony on a specific item, so therefore it must be that you're going to remember it maybe even more than 60 years. Mashenkin, when it comes to this mound in which no one has specific edus regarding it, it's just that people know within 60 years status. After 60 years, people don't know. So when it comes to that, you're right. There is a limitation of 60 years. Masha'enkein, when it's talking about actual knowledge of a specific case, so there may be even more than 60 years. So we're going to stop there. Let's see question 2. Meheichen hoichiach Rav Chisda. Where do we see, according to Rav Chisda, that shir hazman she'adam zoicher edus this is what we just saw. That we saw when it comes to this mound, which is old, after 60 years, we say it's tameh because a person doesn't recognize or remember whether there's a mace there. And we end up pushing it off and said, no, when it over there, people may just forget. However, when it comes to edus, because it's something in which you yourself need to know about, therefore maybe you'll have that recollection even after the 60 years have gone by. TB, going out of order, TB4 says that the Shnaim Chasumim al Ashtar. So you have two people that signed on a document, Umesu, which is how we started off, and they died. However, there was already verification that from a different document that this was acceptable signatures. Uvosh Shnaim and Ashuk. Now you have two other people that came, Vikimu HaChasimos, and they said, yeah, these are their signatures. But they're pasul. So ma din hashtar. So we end up saying that what we do, and this is question 4, havile treu trey, and we say so that's what we said. That when it comes to the love. Let's just make sure we have it over here. So this is on the top that Rav Nachman said, Uki trei bahadi trei, uki moina becheskes mari, which is the same thing as Dabar Shatya. So that's what we do. That we say that because of this discrepancy, there's an argument between these two witnesses, so we're going to end up saying that we're not going to rely on this star, and therefore, wherever the money is, it is. And therefore, as we mentioned, if it's in the Lova's hands, which it probably is, so he gets to keep it. However, if let's say the Malva grabbed hold of it, if he was Tafis, then the Malva gets to keep it in that situation. That was TB4. TA4. Matai Kosev Adam Eduso al Shtar. When can a person write testimony on a document? Even after many years, according to everyone. Umadin, if let's say a person may not necessarily remember the edus. So he says like this. This is TA4. So kishahuskru ma'atzmo. So in a situation TA4, which is on the bottom of Chaf Amid Beis, TA4. If it says over here, Kaisav Adam Edus al Shtar. Right, you're allowed to write this. Umayid alafil acher kamashanim. So he says. Everyone holds that certainly b'hushu zoicher ma'atzmo. If you're going to remember it anyway, so then certainly it's not an issue. If let's say maskir loy, once you read it, einu meid rak imhu sum rabbanon. Unless you're at sum rabbanon, then we're more lenient. Adkan.